I hate to break it to you, but you just fell for clickbait. Um, I do want people to use Linux. I use Linux. I'm quite happy with Linux. I'm a long time Linux user, almost 20 years now. I'm a philosophical Linux user, meaning that I drank the Stallman Kool-Aid pretty early on, and I am happy with the Libre free software approach. I'm not terribly interested in corporations and Adobe and Microsoft, etc., bringing their stuff over to Linux. There's been some controversy, and I really usually try to stay above this e-celebrity community controversy crap. But I feel like there's not a good primer on approaching Linux and the user base and the community at large. Because of that, I would like to address two groups of people in this video. The first group of people are the existing Linux users who are maybe over-enthusiastic about Linux and are showing up in people's social media, people's comment sections, particularly those who have large audiences, maybe, and insisting that all of their computer problems will be solved if they've used Linux, and are probably a bit overzealous about it. I understand where you're coming from. I understand you feel like you want to spread the word as it is, but this isn't a religion, and simping for an operating system is gross. Please don't do it. Couple reasons for that. If you do harass somebody with a large audience into using Linux or cajole them into it, and there's been a few now here recently in this last little bit who have been trying Linux, and there's been some that I think have done a fair approach. Alliance Tech Tips has done a fair approach, I think, and others that just used it were like, Linux isn't good for gaming, Linux is garbage, and they have a million person audience. Stop. You're not helping it. You're just getting more people to say Linux sucks, which it kind of does sometimes, but everything sucks. Here's the thing, partner. Everything sucks when it's broken. Doesn't matter what it is. Anyway, but I would say to not do that. The main reason is people have, and this is something I've learned, people have an extreme kind of Stockholm syndrome, for lack of a better word, bias towards the things that they have decided that they like or have bought. I have friends and colleagues who have had MacBooks literally almost catch their pants on fire, and they still buy Apple because Apple is the best. And they're just going to be far more likely to deal with shortcomings and handle them in their perceived choice. Now, we can make an argument that perhaps they are led there by advertising or something, or like the group think, but regardless, in their mind, this is their decision. This is the thing they picked out, and they're just going to like it, and they're going to be more willing to deal with its problems than anything that they feel like they were hoodwinked, tricked, forced into trying. And even though you're not holding their arm behind their back and threatening their family, they probably feel a little bit coerced into trying Linux if you're in their comment section or suggesting to them. If they're a close friend of yours, you might endanger their friendship. It's better just to be known as the weird Linux guy or girl, or all of the above, guy, girl, all of the above, none of the above, than it is to be the one who tried to get them to do it and they ended up hating it. It's just the way it is. I don't know if there's like a psychological term for this phenomenon, but that's just the way it is. The people, and I'm going to tell you this from years of experience, who use desktop Linux, and I'm speaking exclusively in the desktop use case here, and have liked it and stuck with it, the people who are curious about it, wanted more control over their machine, or had some other reason to come and try it out. And they kind of sought it out themselves and discovered the community, discovered how it all worked, and stuck with it. Anyone, I think, that like went to, they kind of came around to it through, we'll say coercion, for lack of a better word, they end up hating it, just flat out. And that's okay. So you're really not helping. You might harm your friendships. And ultimately, this is hard to hear, but remember, liking Linux is not a substitute for having a personality. Do other things. If you want to contribute, projects need documentation, coding if you're up to snuff on that. Make some tutorials or how-tos on your own website. Make a video like this. Well, not like this, but some of the other ones I do on this channel where I show using Linux in a productive way in my work. Those can all help more. And they're kind of putting yourself out there instead of convincing someone else to do it for you. And that may be more helpful. Just some sage advice from someone who's a little older. Not that much older, but I've been around the planet probably a few more times than you have. I've been using Linux since Christ was a cowboy. Just, these are just some things that I've kind of figured out along the way, trying to save you some heartache. All right? Are we cool? I don't want you to quit using Linux or get mad because I may have suggested that you are a bit cringy. Simping over an operating system is pretty cringy, but, I just want you to straighten up and be better. Okay? Cool. We're good? We're good. So the second group of people I want to address is particularly these large audience having individuals, tech pundits, YouTubers, what have you, who get convinced to try Linux or decide to try it, discover it's not to their liking, and talk, about it. I think Linus Tech Tips has had some good points. I like some of the bugs they found, and I think those are usability problems. There's been a few others, and I had a negative Twitter encounter with one of them who, I don't want to name names because you never know. And it was one of those things where they were like, oh no, you're wrong, until Linux becomes Windows, basically, was their argument. Until it has the usability of Windows, it's just garbage and a waste of everyone's time. And that is the attitude I want to address a little bit. And anyone else, even if you don't have a mega audience and you're just looking to try Linux, maybe here's some kind of a good primer of what you're getting yourself into, why the Linux community may seem hostile on the outside, and, kind of what you're signing up for. The first thing you need to realize, Linux is not Windows. Linux is not a Mac. Let me write that down so we know what we're working with here. Linux is not Windows. Ditto for Mac. Okay? Don't expect the same features. Don't expect the same level of polish or usability. Both of these are consumer products. And I don't mean that as like a grade of product, but they're made for an end user to just work. And especially Mac, Apple builds the hardware, Apple builds the chips, Apple builds the OS. Everything's going to work well together. Don't expect out of something that is 11 billion people working in 11 billion different projects together, don't expect that level of integration. Now, let me give you a quick lowdown on why this doesn't hold true. So, this is your CPU, this is your computer, maybe it's an i12, I don't know, whatever's out today. It talks to the RAM, video card, audio, input, output devices, things like hard drives, SSDs, keyboards, printers. Here's you all the way over here, the user. Sorry, I'm not an artist. I do like doing it on paper because I feel like this is more organic. I could do it on the confuser, but now, you have a few ways of getting your hardware to do things. Probably the most basic way is to go get some power supplies and some tools and apply voltages and currents right to the input-output lines on your processors and get it to move registers around and move things around in memory. I've done that before on much simpler computers. That's dangerous for you. That's dangerous for the computer, and it is terribly inefficient. So we have this thing called software. And so I'm going to draw a line here, right? And so down here is Linux. Linux. Up here is like Windows or Mac. All right? So on the Linux world, and every operating system has a kernel, you've got the Linux kernel. And if you've been around Free Software Foundation at all, the Richard Stallman copy pasta that's as I've taken to calling it GNU plus Linux or whatever. That's very pedantic, but it's technically correct. Linux is just the kernel on the most technical level. I don't really agree with that completely, but it is technically correct. And that's got your drivers. That's got your network support. That's got your file system support. That's got NetFilter, your firewall down here. All that stuff is in the kernel, and that talks to your hardware, to tell it to do things, display things on the screen, write this file to an SSD, put this out to my printer, send this file over the network. That's what its job is. And that's written by one group of people. There are developers from all across the spectrum that contribute to the Linux kernel, but ultimately, its release schedule and code readiness is determined by the Linux kernel mailing list people, and they have their own schedule and release dates and all that stuff. Above that, you've got things like, and this is just a 10-mile high view, init systems, INIT systems. You've got libraries like glibc or busybox. You've got higher level libraries like GTK, Qt. You've got audio daemons like Pulse or what's the other one? Pipewire. It just left my brain. Pipewire is the latest one here. I can't read that. Pipewire. And this init system here these days is usually systemd, but you can actually have several different ones. There's sysinit. I think Upstart's still kicking around. I think it's still zombied out there somewhere. All of these are written by different people, with different goals, different release schedules, and stuff like that. Not even working for the same company. Yeah, like Red Hat, for example, may pay people to work on the Linux kernel, and may also pay people to work on systemd, and may also pay people to work on Pipewire. But they're in their own little, I'm not sure how Red Hat's internal structure works, but, they aren't the only ones contributing to it. And, these projects work independently of any of these companies. Okay. On top of that, so, your init system also starts services, right? So just to kind of tell you what this does, SSD, it'll start your Pulse daemons. It'll start your display managers. This is what shows you the login screen. So like SDDM, GDM, LightDM, stuff like that, where you actually type in your password to log in. Sorry for probably the choppy editing. It's dry air. I'm having some throat drainage issues. I need to get that checked out, but it's not the Rona. So I'm having to break to take a little drink of tea. Above that, you've got the UI. Right, UI. You also have a package manager in here, so like apt. Sorry, I keep forgetting that. Apt, DNF, yum. What's Arch used these days? Pacman. I don't really use Arch. That's all in here. The UI. So this could be everything from a command line shell like ZSH bash to just a window manager like Awesome, WM, or i3 to a full-fledged desktop environment like GNOME or Plasma or XFCE. And the list goes on. Mate. If I forgot your favorite one, there's Cinnamon, there's Enlightenment, there's a tons of them, ... etc. All of these are written by different people. And, you interact with this, and then it flips switches and stuff and changes your volume. Maybe it displays something on the graphics card through the kernel, which is usually called through a graphics kit like GTK, Qt, maybe OpenGL or Vulkan. And all of these are written by different people. Each one of these are like self-contained little projects, and they all communicate with each other. Right? Makes sense. So a Linux distribution, when you download an ISO, takes all of these, right, and picks and chooses which ones it wants to keep and use, and they package it into like Debian, Fedora, which is my current favorite desktop. I'm underlining that one. Red Hat Enterprise Linux, and its relative, CentOS, Rocky Linux, Alma Linux, etc. Ubuntu, Slackware, etc. They kind of come through here. The only thing they really have in common is they use the Linux kernel. Well, Debian has one that uses the FreeBSD kernel, but we won't go there. So then next, these projects, these distributions pick the init system they want, the different audio libraries, video libraries, UI stuff that they want to include, and package it up into the Linux image that you download. There is no overarching authority here. It's a big box of Legos to some degree. And ones work better than others. Some work better than others for certain applications. Some are more stable than others. Some are more science experiments than others. It really depends, and there's no overarching authority. So you do end up with 6 different ways to do things, which I've heard is a complaint. And I think it's a strength. It may be a weakness. It means that you kind of have to know more about how this is put together than you would on a Windows computer or a Mac computer. It also means that you have options. So, like if one way doesn't work, you've got another way you can try. If if you want to use it on lower power hardware, you've got different sets of tools that may work better for that. If you want to build a cluster out of it, you've got tools that work better for that. Now on the Windows and Mac side, they've got a kernel, kernel. If you're on a Mac, that's Mach. If you're on Windows, that's NT. They have whatever their version of an init system is here. I think it's still launched on the Mac. I don't know. Windows is services.msc or whatever it's got in there. And they've got their own windowing libraries and toolkits. We'll call lib, init, kernel, graphics and audio. That's audio. That's awful. Audio subsystems and a UI, but they're usually more intertwined. Like this is all made by one company and made to work together, and it's got a more limited use case. There's usually an overarching authority that wrangles all these cats and tells them how to work, but it is more limiting. But it does provide a more refined, consistent experience, especially with these companies. Apple's got total control of their full stack from the silicon on up to the display server and everything. Windows, Microsoft doesn't really make their own hardware too much, a little bit, but they don't make their own processors and stuff. But they have tremendous pool with Intel and AMD and OEMs like Dell, HP, Acer, Lenovo, to make sure that things work a certain way on their machines. Yeah, Linux has none of that. Linux is, it's cobbled together, and it doesn't have the kind of capitalistic pull that these two have, for lack of a better term. Okay, so Linux is not Windows. It's a different set of tools for a different task. I keep turning away from the mic. I apologize if it's a little quiet in spots. I have my notes over here. Maybe I should move them to the other side. One moment. Okay, I'm back. I moved my notes over so I could read them and not turn away from the mic. So they're all built by different things. They're all built by different groups. Another comment I've been seeing, and I don't understand this. If someone buys a Mac and they have a Windows software library, maybe they're a former Windows user, or they have a Windows gaming computer and they buy a Mac laptop, I don't see too much consternation that Windows games don't work on a Mac. People seem to understand that, and vice versa. If someone has a Mac and builds a Windows computer or buys a Windows computer, they don't get mad that Final Cut Pro doesn't work on Windows. They understand that that's a Mac only issue. Linux offers, this really isn't the correct way to draw this, but something called Proton through Steam or Wine. That is like a compatibility layer. It offers the Windows kind of APIs that allow some Windows programs to work, particularly games. And I've seen a lot of harsh criticism of this. And I just want to say, yeah, it doesn't work perfectly. No, this is second fiddle to a native Windows box. If you are a heavy duty gamer and you want the best support for your stuff, just run Windows. This really only works with Steam games very well. Like EA, if it's got any kind of anti-cheat in it, real hit or miss. If it's an EA game or an Epic game, they don't really test on this. This is always going to be second fiddle. And I just don't understand the consternation around, like, this is a miracle that it works at all. The fact that, many hundreds, if not thousands of games work 80%, 90% with most features is just a miracle, because this is built on a totally different stack from Windows. It's not a Windows replacement. It's for people like me who maybe play a game once in a blue moon these days, and it works good enough for that, or maybe they play older titles or something. If you are playing the latest and greatest and have to have it on launch day, get a Windows machine. Okay, I don't understand the criticism of this when there seems to be understanding between these two systems that some titles are not going to work on the other system. Okay? The real advantage of this is Linux gives you complete control of this system. So the real advantage of this is that you have complete control of the system. Everything on here, You can take off, you can put on, you can not have parts of it. It may not work as well, but you can do it. And there's no overarching authority in the Linux world to tell you how to do your stuff. There's no one, who's going to decide to cut on a feature or send telemetry on your behalf without asking. Canonical aside. Anyway, in Mac and Windows world, you've always got Uncle Tim or Uncle Satya or whoever's running Google nowadays, deciding what's good for you, deciding, I want to rummage through your stuff because I think you're a criminal. Things like that. Yeah, they provide safety. And this is the analogy I like to use here, and I hate that it's overused by certain crazy groups in our world, but these do provide safety. You have to work kind of hard to wreck one of these days. They provide a lot of airbags. The only safety feature in Linux is the gray matter between your ear holes. If you say sudo rm/rf/ your root partition, it's going to do it. You're in control. That being said, there is far less corporate interference in your life, which I find appealing. It's a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I think this is more fun and engaging and better to use. This I don't find as fun as engaging. This is just like, a refrigerator to me, and I don't think about it. And maybe that works for you. That's okay. That's fine. I'm not here to judge. The next part of this is I want to get to is the prickliness of the Linux community, and there's a little bit of blind fanboyism, particularly in younger individuals I find who have discovered Linux and are really happy with it. Is that honeymoon phase, and they don't take criticism too well. The other side of the prickliness in the Linux community is the I would say the older users like myself who have been doing this for a while. And there was one particular argument made by a YouTuber. I don't remember which one because I don't really watch that stuff. I'm older now. The byproduct, get excited for next product type of tech journalist YouTuber just does not appeal to me. I have a trackball from the 90s. Like, that's not to disparage that. Clearly, you guys serve an audience, and you do very well. Your content is apparently well put together and stuff, and you seem skilled at your job. Kudos, really hand clap, appreciation for what you do for your audience. They seem to enjoy it. It's just not my thing. That being said, one of them made an argument that, there has to be a GUI. Command lines are outdated. You don't, you shouldn't need the command line. There shouldn't be a command line in Linux. And no, that hot take is not a hot take. I remember being on a Linux mailing list in 2004, and some new guy came on and said, "Why is there a command line here? It's 2004. There should be a GUI for everything. Like, GUIs are superior." And he got dogpiled because there are millions of use cases where a command line is superior or a command line is more efficient. Having the option there it means more flexibility, and rightfully so. I think that guy got his butt handed to him, and yeah, that's not a hot take. We've heard it before, and I wanted to use that as an example as to why there's some prickliness. Those of us who have been doing this a while have heard all these before, over and over again. In fact, when this whole Linux challenge started among some YouTubers, I was like, oh Lord, this again. No, not again. Because someone convinced them to try Linux. They're going to find Steam, Proton, and Wine doesn't work 100% of the time. They're going to find the command line still exists. They're going to find that, guess what? Linux is not a utopia. It's got problems too. And they're just going to go on to their million-plus user audience and tell them that Linux sucks. And then those people are going to flood forums and stuff, which is what's happened, and mailing lists, and talk about it, and talk about how much, how bad their experiences with Linux is. They were trying to follow these guys and gals. And I'm just like, oh, it's 2007 and September 1993 all over again. That's some of the prickliness on our side. We've seen these arguments before. We've heard these arguments. And a lot of these people tend to approach Linux as a consumer. And I don't think you can do that and get the most out of it. And just want to say this, and this is going to sound mean, and I don't mean to sound mean. The Linux community is not this mean to some degree, but the Linux community, and I don't want it to sound gatekeeping, but I can't think of a better way to phrase it. The Linux community does not owe you anything. We're just a group of people who use this tool. The fact that so many demands get made when this happens is not, no. Even the developers don't owe you anything. A lot of these tools are written by a handful of people for a specific use case. Maybe they don't have access to your hardware. Maybe they didn't test it for your hardware. Maybe they wrote it in 1998 on a Pentium 3 and have been maintaining it 20 years quiet. All of those are real scenarios, by the way. And, that's just the way it is. You have to come at it, I think, from less of like the demanding consumer. Like if your Mac breaks and you take it to the Apple store, there's the entitlement side of it. Rightfully so. You paid good money for it. And they don't give you the access to fix it really on your own, or the knowledge or the tools to fix it on your own. And so you show up to the Apple store and you demand satisfaction. When you bring that attitude into a more open, fluid, community type situation, you're going to catch blowback, because a lot of us have spent a lot of years making this work, figuring it out, putting in the work, putting in the time to understanding it. And we like it. And we get work done with it. It's not just a hobby. Like I do my video and photo editing on Linux just fine, hunky-dory, not even in Adobe tools. And, to have someone like plop down like they are the cock of the walk and, belly up to the bar and go, you got to fix this is, well, from our point of view, it is off-putting. I try to just kind of water off a duck's back about that these days. But I mean, if you can see that from that point of view, you can understand where the hostility comes from. Especially when you come up with like the things like, the command line doesn't need to be there. Not my way. I'm used to doing things, ergo it's bad, yeah, that'll get you really poked in the eye real fast. That's really good. That's really good ways to tick off the Linux user base really fast. The other side of that is many of these developers are experts in certain fields. I mean, like PhD experts. And a lot of the tools written for Windows or Mac are not written for experts. And I've run into this. I'm not an expert. I'm just a dude who uses Linux. I'm an idiot. Like I've gotten hit in the head too many times. I don't know what I'm doing half the time. Your contribution, even if you're well-meaning and you make a suggestion, their expertise may supersede yours, and you may be told to get good, go home, and learn more. And there are some corners, and it's unfortunate that it's this way. I wish that things were more open and flexible, but a lot of these people don't have PR people. A lot of these experts don't have PR people to really work with. And then I'll get to some ways around that later. But and I've run into that. I've offered to help projects, and it's like, hey, I'm trying to learn this thing, and I'd like to contribute in some manner or the other. Maybe not writing code, but I'm learning another language or something, and I'd like to translate some documentation as practice. They're like, no, you're not fluent. No, you don't have the coding capability that we need. Get good, go home. Like, they are blunt, and they will call you out on your ignorance, and you may feel bad about yourself. There's parts of the open software world that are not very handholdy, that are not very, say you can do these things. Let me see examples of it. Okay, that's not what we need right now. Get good, go home. That's just the way it is. You can avoid that in places, and I'll hit that later. But and that's unfortunate. I don't really like that attitude either. I can understand it from the developer's point of view of, I'm writing a project here. I'm interested in this. I'm doing this in my secondary off time. I don't have time to train 3 kids or, in my case, middle-aged people who want to learn about this as a hobby. They can read the books, they can go to school, they can get the degree, they can learn this stuff on their own and then come and make a meaningful contribution. Until then, I'm going to block you from the list. So you're going to have to get used to that to some degree. That's a problem. You still have to come into it, though, I think, with the engaged user contributor mindset over the simple consumer mindset that you have in the other ones. That will get you much farther than with the community than just, showing up and demanding. Doesn't fix all the problems, but it does fix some. Another thing, people often use Linux for different reasons, or open source software for different reasons. Some of them are philosophical, some of them are practical, some of them are technical. Technical incorrectness, or what you perceive to be technical incorrectness, or substandard arguments, like, oh, Linux is 3% slower at writing to this SSD or using this graphics card than Windows, ergo Linux is bad, don't fly there. There are different reasons to use different tools, emotional and ones too. It is what it is. So I think those kind of arguments do not endear new users too much to the Linux community either. So to sum up my feelings on this, Linux offers you a great degree of freedom and capability out of your computing experience. That being said, it can be said inherently that more freedom comes with more risk, requires more independence on your part, and there is no safety features. There is no safety belt. The only safety feature you have is that mushy gray goo in your skull case. At the end of the day, you are responsible for more. You don't have Uncle Tim, Uncle Satya, Uncle Bezos looking over your shoulder, whoever runs Google these days, looking over your shoulder, trying to make sure you're okay, or, scanning your stuff or whatever they're doing. That's nice. I think that makes I really feel like I can trust my Linux computer because I know what's going on in it and I understand it, and I have the whole stack is available for me. But I'm comfortable with relying on myself. You have to kind of come at it from that perspective, and be a little bit more independent, be a little bit more experimental with your stuff. That being said, I want to offer a caveat, like one of these, asterisks. Tell you, look at the footnotes. Footnote 1. There are some Linux distributions that are more friendly, more corporate backed. If you're starting off with like an Arch or a Gentoo or something like that, yeah, that's probably the prickliest of the prickly Linux communities. Check out Fedora. Check out Ubuntu. Check out Debian to some degree. Debian's probably more combative than the other two. Fedora is my favorite. Their community is much more end-user centric, and provides good feedback and a good jumping off spot, and is much more helpful, much more civil about things. I really like Fedora. If you are using a Linux desktop today, I think it should be Fedora. This is my opinion. It's got GUI checkboxes for installing the NVIDIA driver and the Steam stuff right from the GUI. No command line needed if you're terrified of that. And their community is just overall, I think, more warm and helpful than some of the other ones. They don't have the assumption that you automatically know all of this, and they will do a little bit more hand-holding. And Red Hat is a corporate entity, and they have a corporate face to maintain, and they will work to do that, which is beneficial to you. You're not quite as on your own there. I really like Fedora. From the community to the final product up, I think it's great. Look at Linux distributions like that. Another hint I can give you is to read more. And I'm a ham radio operator, and you don't want to have a big mouth. You want to be listening, lurk a little bit, read some documentation, kind of read the tone of the community you're getting ready to interact with, and just don't pop up. Make sure you're not like the 12th person to ask this question in a week type stuff. Okay. Because a lot of these people are providing things out of the kindness of their heart in their spare time, and you don't want to ruin them on it, right? You want to be helpful. You want to be friendly. But ultimately, in all these scenarios, there's no airbag here. You are it. So enjoy the ride. Enjoy it for what it is. It may not be the tool for you. If you are a heavy-duty gamer, maybe stick with Windows. There's no shame in that. These are tools. And like I said before, simping over an operating system is pretty cringy, I think. Maybe Mac and Windows is your tool. That's fine. No judgment here. I think there is benefits to this. I think free software is important. But, cajoling people and harassing people is not the way to go about spreading that sort of idea. The idea that you should be able to control your own equipment. The idea that you don't have to be resigned to renting things from Adobe and renting things from Microsoft and having your data sent off by Google and Microsoft to who knows where, to having Apple scanning on your phone because they think you may have, illicit material on there. You don't have to live with things like that. You don't have to live being suspected of being a criminal or having your data sold to advertisers. That kind of irks me. I don't mean to defend people who do participate in those kinds of illicit materials. I think it is a problem, but I also don't like being assumed to be a criminal. That's kind of one of those. It's like copy protection on Blu-rays. I buy a disc. I want to use it for whatever purpose I see fit. I'm not a criminal. I'm not selling 500 copies of it. Stop assuming I'm a criminal. I didn't mean this to be negative or gatekeeping. I'm just trying to explain kind of the ins and outs of the Linux community. I've gotten hit by this in the past too. If you have questions, my comment section is always open. I try to be friendly, but I just got tired of hearing the same arguments happen again, just on a larger scale. And I kind of wanted to chime in on it. I'm usually not one for these e-celebrity drama things. Don't worship e-celebrities. That's really cringy too. They're just, some of them are really cringy, but just, do your own thing, try it out. Try to remember active, engaged user instead of consumer. Try to remember that some level of expertise may be required by some things, by some groups. Try to remember independence and independent problem-solving capabilities. But that doesn't mean it doesn't work. Fedora work. I slapped it. I have it on my desktop in my XPS. It works fine. I use it every day. I have had almost no problems out of it in the years I've been using Fedora, and before that Debian, and before that Slackware, and before that Fedora again. Oh wait, Fedora. It's been 20 years of Linux use. I forget something, and I realize that you may get pestered by that first type of Linux user I talked about. I'm sorry about that. I'm a content person too. I make photos, I make videos, I put them online. I sometimes code things and put them online. Although I'm not really a software developer, I'm studying foreign languages now, and I've studied physics in the past. But I feel like there's a lot of leeway in what you guys let your community get away with sometimes, and kind of slapping you around. I've become more capricious with kind of not putting up with too much crap. So if you get an annoying Linux user, it's totally okay to ban them. Who's saying try, Turbo Manjaro Linux, that's like a derivative, just say no, I'm not interested in doing that. And if they get annoying, just hit the block button. That's what I've blocked people for less things. Oh, I don't like the anime waifu in your avatar. That's not the best girl. Block. I feel like a lot of this stuff online has gotten out of control, and I understand. I just want to say I feel you. I understand a little bit of what you're coming from with thousands of comments a day. I only get, a 10 comments a day maybe, and it's a lot to deal with. So I empathize, and I feel you. Anyway, but that's really all I have to say. It's not as bad as it sounds, I think. There are no expectations of, there are no consumer expectations in the Linux world. There are more engaged expectations. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Now, I guess go on, get out of here.